So, the problem was not the instruments, but what was being presented. You couldn't tell what was being presented. You couldn't tell which instrument was playing. Remember, Ellen White did not say that the instruments were wrong. She did say that what was wrong was the way or manner the instruments were played. There's a principle in this in our time. The problem isn't the truths that are being presented, although sometimes that is also a problem. The problem is the way or manner the truth, the instruments of truth are being played, and are the instruments of truth in the Bible bringing confusion by the manner they are used. This is a deep subject, and the purpose of these questions are not to convince anyone to make a change in music. But I want to point some things out with music that apply. So, in a testimony that is on the Awaken Ministries YouTube site called 5 Years After, I shared my testimony in a presentation called 5 Years After. And in that testimony, I shared about the role that God used percussion in my life. So there is a role that music can play. When used with correct teaching, not separate from that, and used with the right relationship with God, and when the instruments are played right. So I'm not saying this to convince anyone about anything with music, but I want to point out one thing. That is that there are musicians who played the instruments right, who did wonderful Jesus-centered songs, biblical songs, and they participated this last year in a concert at a mall that had the papacy and all the Protestant leaders in churches who are participating in what some of us would call the threefold union. So even if the instruments are played right, but the teachings are not right, it's a warning, and we can apply this to present truth. So, when instruments are played the right way, they can lead to a type of brokenness that comes from God, in which a person can find strength in God and be led to having a recovery walk with Jesus. But with the Holy Flesh doctrine, instruments were used in the wrong way, and the result was fanaticism. So let's take a look at an aspect of this that hasn't been considered too much. What is justification by faith? It is the work of God in laying the glory of man in the dust and doing for man that which is not in his power to do for himself. When men see their own nothingness, they are prepared to be clothed with the righteousness of Christ. When they begin to praise and exalt God all the day long, then by beholding they are becoming changed into the same image. What is regeneration? It is revealing to man what is in his own nature, that in himself he is worthless. These lessons you have never learned. Oh, that you could realize the value of a human soul. 20 MR, page 117, paragraph 3. This was what was lacking in 1888. This is the Mare experience. So, using any truth in a manner that promotes holy flesh is an error and causes confusion. The teachings were that they were perfected, that body, soul, and spirit were holy. The exercises they did were to attempt to achieve this state of being, but Ellen White said it is an impossibility. The line between truth and fanaticism starts like this. They both seem to be doing the same thing. But the fanaticism takes just a little switch like this, and they still seem like they're headed in the right way. And then the fanaticism ends up going the opposite way. This is how someone who actually learned from Ellen White about the ministry of music and how to use music, this is how this person presented an understanding of fanaticism. Sinless perfectionism, holy flesh is an error. The problem isn't the truths, although we could be off on truth a little. We want to be careful in how we apply prophecy and fractals, which are true. Just like we want to be careful how we apply musical instruments. Sinless perfectionism, Ellen White said, is an impossibility. But correctly played, the instruments of truth can bring to. So this is what Daniel experienced. You can read about it in Daniel chapter 8 and 9. This is what happens with the Mari experience, with the right kind of brokenness that comes from God. And when the instruments of truth are correctly presented. Let's review what Ellen White said. The holy flesh doctrine versus truth versus falsehood. Holy flesh is an error. Holy flesh is an impossibility. All may obtain holy hearts. Holy flesh is presumption. Holy flesh is a wrong construction on God's word. It misrepresents God. It leads to pollution of soul, body, and spirit. It leads people to deny or claim that all their actions are holy and they cannot sin, and they're not able to see their own defects in how they treat people and how they value people. So I have a question. It matters not whether the confusion or wonderful suppositions were with or without music. The result of the teachings is the same. The teachings of holy flesh are an error and bring confusion. The teachings are promoting holy flesh, and any truth that is in a manner that promotes holy flesh is an error and causes confusion. The teachings